Kiss muna ako. I want to kiss. Shore of Eternity. Paano ko siya ano? Listen. Bano? Jerusalem is a port city in the shore of eternity. The Temple Mount is huge ship of magnificent luxury liner. Okay, basahin ko na lang mamaya. Ganyan lang. Walang salita-salita. Beneath the glass floor remains of the Hasmonean fortification 2nd century BCE, Second Temple period. Really? Second Temple period? Ang taas naman ito. Ang tibay ng pagkagawa. At tibay ang pagkagawa ng Second century BCE na bato. Kita nyo na? Nandito ako sa Tower of David. Sinubukan kong pumasok sa museum nila. And you try to come here to experience about Israel. I am here in the highest point of all city, inside the King David. Wow, very, very strong. When you look at that stone, it's very, very strong. How can I go out here? (3,300 BCE). Yan yung mga design. Ibon. Sunod, 1,500 is BCE. 500 BCE to 1,000. First Temple period. Para siyang puno na na ilaw. 70 CE, 538 BCE, Second Temple period. May minora na sila. Ayun pala naman may pipindutin Tingnan nga natin. English. Time of the city. Word. Panoorin natin.
Following the Persian conquest of the Babylonian Empire and the decree of Cyrus, some of the Jewish exiles returned to Judea. They rebuilt the temple in Jerusalem, along with other leaders. Ezra and Nehemiah strove to create Jewish identity and rebuild the city. After Alexander the Great conquered the country, Hellenistic influence spread, and religious cultural conflicts arose within Jewish society. The Seleucid king Antiochus IV banned Jewish customs and defiled the temple, prompting the Maccabean revolt. The Hasmoneans purified the temple and founded an autonomous kingdom. After the Romans conquered the land of Israel, they appointed Herod as king and ruler of Judea. He developed Jerusalem with many building projects, culminating in the expansion of the Temple Mount compound and the renovation of the Second Temple, a magnificent structure which attracted countless pilgrims. Despite rising tensions leading to civil strife among various Jewish sects, Jerusalem reached a pinnacle of greatness, all of which ended with the Great Revolt and the Roman devastation of the city and the temple.
Ito, tingnan natin kung ano ito. English. Map of the sea. Play natin kung ano yan.
King David conquered the Jebusite fortress of Jerusalem in 1000 BCE and made it his capital, naming it the City of David and bringing it the Ark of the Covenant. His son King Solomon built the temple on Mount Moriah. The Queen of Sheba's famous visit testifies to Solomon's fame and his kingdom's wealth. After Solomon's death, the monarchy was divided. But Jerusalem, the scene of many biblical events, remained the capital of Judah. At the end of the 8th century BCE, King Hezekiah of Judah led a revolt against the Assyrian oppressors. Hezekiah readied the city for an Assyrian siege, fortified its walls, and hewed a tunnel to bring water from the Gihon spring. The Bible relates that the city was miraculously saved, yet barely a century later, the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem. Solomon's temple was burned, and many of Jerusalem's citizens were exiled to Babylon. The First Temple era was over.
The remains of a small village built some 5,000 years ago were found near the Gihon spring. In time, the village became a city. The walled city had massive fortifications that guarded the spring. The earliest written evidence of the name Jerusalem comes from small clay molds and figurines found in Egypt. These inscriptions, known as the execration texts, contain the name Ushalmu as one of the Canaanite cities that was hostile towards Egypt. Further written testimony from the 14th century BCE appears in letters sent by Jerusalem's king to the Egyptian pharaoh. Jerusalem is first named in the Bible as the city of Shalem, in the story of Abraham's meeting with Melchizedek. The site of the binding of Isaac is identified with Mount Moriah, where the temple was later built. When the tribes of Israel settled the surrounding areas, Jerusalem still remained in Jebusite hands. The city's fate changed forever when it was conquered by King David, who made it his kingdom's capital.
After the destruction of Jerusalem and the Jewish temple, the 10th Legion Praetensis was stationed in the city. The Jewish leadership reconvened in Yavne, where Judaism was reformed after the destruction. The memory of Jerusalem and the temple occupied a central place in Jewish life. Around 130 CE, the Roman Emperor Hadrian founded a pagan city on Jerusalem's ruins, naming it Illa Capitolina. The city was planned as a Roman town, with orthogonal streets, plazas, temples, public buildings, and impressive triumphal arches. The founding of a pagan city on the ruins of Jerusalem was a major factor in the outbreak of the Bar Kokhba revolt, which hoped to rebuild the temple. The Roman suppression of the revolt had disastrous consequences for Judea, and Jews were officially banned from entering the city. Jerusalem existed as a Roman city for over 200 years, until the rise of Christianity in the 4th century.
Byzantine period. Touch it.
The Roman Empire was transformed in the early 4th century when Christianity was recognized as its official religion. As the scene of events in both the Old and New Testaments, Jerusalem quickly began to attract pilgrims. Saint Helena, Emperor Constantine's mother, was the first pilgrim to the Holy Land. While visiting Jerusalem, she miraculously discovered the true cross and founded the Church of the Holy Sepulchre on the site. Dozens of churches and monasteries were built in the city. The population grew, and a wall was built around Mount Zion. Throngs of pilgrims contributed to the city's economic prosperity. Pilgrim accounts describe both mass celebrations and Jerusalem's famous sacred relics. Byzantine Byzantine emperors launched magnificent building projects in the city, whose wealth and prosperity are evident in its artistic remains and splendid mosaic pavements. Yet, the early 7th century was marked by political instability, and the Muslim conquest eventually changed the face of the city beyond recognition. The Roman Empire was transformed in the early 4th century when Christianity was recognized as its official religion. As the scene of events in both the Old and New Testaments, Jerusalem quickly began to attract pilgrims. Saint Helena, Emperor Constantine's mother, was the first pilgrim to the Holy Land. While visiting Jerusalem, she miraculously discovered the true cross and founded the Church of the Holy Sepulchre on the site. Dozens of churches and monasteries were built in the city. The population grew, and a wall was built around Mount Zion. Throngs of pilgrims contributed to the city's economic prosperity. Pilgrim accounts describe both mass celebrations and Jerusalem's famous sacred relics. Byzantine emperors launched magnificent building projects in the city, whose wealth and prosperity are evident in its artistic remains and splendid mosaic pavements. Yet, the early 7th century was marked by political instability, and the Muslim conquest eventually changed the face of the city beyond recognition.
In the 7th century, Jerusalem was conquered by the Muslims. On the Temple Mount, the Umayyad rulers built the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. In Muslim tradition, these structures are associated with the Prophet Muhammad's night journey from Mecca to the farthest mosque and with his ascent to heaven from the rock. Jerusalem was gradually transformed from a Christian city to one that was distinctly Islamic. The finest examples of Islamic art grace monumental structures built throughout the region at the time. Documents from the Cairo Geniza record the revival of the Jewish community in Jerusalem under Muslim rule. With the rise of the Abbasid dynasty in the mid-8th century, Jerusalem's eminence fell into decline and the city lay neglected. The Fatimid reign was also marked by instability, leaving Jerusalem weakened ahead of the arrival of the Crusaders in the late 11th century.
The First Crusade set out from Europe after a papal address urging the faithful to deliver the Holy Land and the Holy Sepulchre from Muslim hands. In 1099, the Crusaders conquered Jerusalem and massacred the local population. They founded the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem, with Jerusalem as its capital. Queen Melisendre's rule generated massive construction projects, including renovation of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, consecrated 50 years after Jerusalem's conquest. The Crusaders founded military monastic orders to protect and care for pilgrims, and to act as the kingdom's army. Jerusalem inspired new European interest and attracted pilgrims. Many manuscripts featuring images and maps of the city are preserved to this day. The city's Crusader rule was short-lived, and after Saladin's victory in 1187, Jerusalem fell. However, the mark of the Crusader period on the city has endured through the generations.
In 1187, the army of Saladin the Ayyubid defeated the Crusader army at the Battle of the Horns of Hattin in Lower Galilee. The victory led to the conquest of the entire country after a century of Christian rule. Saladin restored Jerusalem's Muslim character with extensive renovations on the Temple Mount and the conversions of churches into Muslim buildings. At the time, the religious status of Jerusalem in Islam grew with the praises of Jerusalem literature. The Ayyubid regime permitted a revival of the Jewish community in Jerusalem, once again a destination for Jewish pilgrims, including the Jewish Spanish poet Yehuda al-Harisi. However, its political importance was limited, and recapture by the Crusaders was a constant fear. The Ayyubid ruler destroyed the city walls in 1219, only a few years after strengthening them. The destruction aimed to prevent the Crusaders from benefiting from the fortifications. This fear was justified in 1229, with the brief return of Crusader rule to the city, after which the Muslims regained Jerusalem for centuries.
The Mamluks conquered Jerusalem. The Mamluks were slave soldiers from the Asian steppe who converted to Islam and were brought to Islamic countries, rebelled, and established a sultanate in Egypt. The Mamluks left a lasting impression on the city by constructing magnificent buildings in a unique and highly decorative style. Most of these were concentrated around the Temple Mount, and many were endowed for religious and social needs. Although the city had little political or military significance, Jerusalem was an important religious and spiritual center and a magnet for mystics and students of Islam. Jerusalem became a cosmopolitan city, and it attracted pilgrims from different religions who contributed to the city's economy. The arrival of the Jewish sage Nachmanides sparked the re-establishment and growth of the Jewish community. The Mamluks ruled Jerusalem for over 250 years, until its conquest by the Ottoman Empire in the early 16th century.
Iba-iba parang lahi nang nakapasok dito. Sabihin next Ottoman period.
The Ottoman Empire ruled Jerusalem for 4 centuries, beginning in 1517. The early part of this period saw heightened development, including rebuilding the city walls and gates. For the next 2 centuries, Jerusalem was largely neglected by the weakening empire, and Janissary units stationed in the city represented the Ottoman regime. In the 19th century, the European powers' interest in Jerusalem increased, and their involvement in local affairs, together with global modernization, greatly influenced the city and led to its rapid expansion. Jerusalem's growing population and the increasingly crowded Old City led residents to move outside the city walls, where public compounds were built alongside residential neighborhoods in a process shared by Jews, Christians, and Muslims. The city's Jewish community grew and eventually formed the majority of the population. In December 1917, as the First World War was drawing to an end, representatives of the Ottoman government waved the flag of surrender before the British Army marched into the city.
Ibig sabihin, meron pala nag-ano rin ditong British Mandate period. Kaya yung mga taga-Europe, meron din sila, British, Jerusalem, London.
In December 1917, 1917, during the First World War, British forces entered Jerusalem under the command of General Allenby. The Balfour Declaration, published weeks before, raised hopes for the future among Jews in the country. During the British Mandate, Jerusalem became the country's capital and the seat of the High Commissioner. Detailed master plans were drawn up, and steps were taken to modernize Jerusalem while preserving the Old City. Jerusalem developed, rapidly expanding in size and population. The Hebrew University, founded on Mount Scopus, was inaugurated with a gala ceremony. However, the Jewish-Arab conflict in Palestine intensified under the Mandate. The holy sites in Jerusalem, and especially the Western Wall and the Temple Mount, stood at the center of religious and national conflict. British restrictions on Jewish immigration and settlement in Palestine provoked action by the Jewish underground and led to the sabotage of government institutions in Jerusalem. On May 14, 1948, the British Mandate for Palestine was terminated, and the independent state of Israel was declared.
With the UN Assembly's decision to adopt the partition plan and end the British Mandate on the 29th of November 1947, the Jewish dream of an independent state in the land of Israel was realized. The following day, the War of Independence began. Fierce battles were fought along the road to Jerusalem, and the city was besieged. At the height of the battles, Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion announced the establishment of the State of Israel on May 14, 1948. When the war ended, the armistice agreement was signed, with the provision that Jerusalem would be divided into two. The western city to be governed by the State of Israel, while the east of the city and the Old City were to be governed by the Kingdom of Jordan. After the Six-Day War in 1967, Jerusalem was united under Israeli rule, and in 1980, the Knesset passed a law declaring Jerusalem the capital of Israel. The Arabs of East Jerusalem received the status of permanent residents, and a minority became Israeli citizens. To this day, Jerusalem stands at the center of the Israel-Palestinian conflict, even though Jews and Arabs live side by side in the city in a shared space. Today, Jerusalem is the largest city in Israel, both in area and population, and receives global leaders, pilgrims, and tourists. For Jewish communities around the world, Jerusalem symbolizes the history and common heritage of the entire Jewish people, shaping Jewish identity throughout the ages.
Lupit nito ay. Ang galing ng pagkagawa. 13th, 14th century na yan eh. Parang hugis bangang maliliit na yan. Lupit. Ito yung libro. Nakuha nilang libro. Islamic manuscript describing Saladin weapon. Collar decorated with crosses, bronze, Crusader period. Cera Santa Museum. Archaeological selection. Ang Jerusalem cross ay iba ang design. Ito ang design ng cross nila. Yan pala yung ginayahan nila. Para siyang butterfly. Yan yung cross. Baka niya panahon pa ni Jesus. Ganyan yung style ng cross. Oh. Ginanyan nila. Pero yun ang design talaga yan. Iba yun. Hindi ko pa ito maintindihan ngayon. Wala akong time. Maganda bumalik dito. Hindi na drawing. Ganyan yung hugis ng Jerusalem. Tuktok ng Jerusalem. Ini-explain dyan kung ano yan. Kaso paano ba i-play yan? Yun ang titingnan. King David. Ang lupit tayo. Nahukay nila to. Actually, nandito pala yung mga gold coins na yan. Ano to? Espada. Sword iron. 2nd, 3rd century BC Roman period. Israel Antiques Authority. Oh, sword of iron. Lupit. Kinalawang na pero buo pa. Marami na sigurong napatay na tao yung itak na to. Sword na yun ang haba. Mugs limestone. 1st century, 2nd temple period. Nahukay yan. Lupit. Ano ito mga beads.
What city do you think? What city are they in? Yes, that's the ring. And look how deep. You want me to get it? How far down it goes?
Ito para siyang tao. Yan, para siyang tao may mga hawak na.
Second century. This is from second century.
Exhibition. Malawak pala to. Nung oras na ako matatapos. CR. Ah, CR. Kung iihi ka. Nakasarado. Exhibition. 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 Ang ganda naman ng Tower of David na ito. Wow, very beautiful. Kasarado. Ganda. Tibay. Tapos mayroon pang chimney ang butas na bintana. Ang lupit. Galing naman ng palasyo na to. How to play? Play. Malamang sound. Walang sound. Oh. Okay, I will continue. I will take picture.